Half Dome is one of the most iconic peaks in the world. Towering almost 9,000 feet, it's the face of Yosemite National Park. In this speech, I will talk about the history and formation of the iconic peak itself, the physical and mental challenges of the hike, and how to prepare for a safe and successful backpacking trip. My name is Alex Gunning, and as a lover of the outdoors and someone who has completed this hike myself with my dad, I want to share why it's so special with me and more than just a physical test. This hike takes careful planning and lots of respect for nature. Throughout this speech, I'll also be showing some pictures from my own hike and trip. Let's start with some background on the formation of Half Dome. It started out as magma and was slowly pushed over millions of years through erosion and uplift into the iconic face that is today, a giant slab of granite towering over the valley. The first documented ascent of Half Dome was October 15, 1875 by George G. Anderson. He pioneered this trail by drilling holes on the last 400 feet where the slippery, steep granite is. He used these holes to install stakes and use them as foot and arm grips to slowly climb up the mountain. The next person was a little more famous. His name is John Muir. On November 10, 1875, he reached the summit by using the same strategy and plan as Anderson. He described a garden at the summit with 4 clumps of pines and said, "It is some satisfaction to feel assured that no lazy person will ever trample these gardens." This vouches for the difficulty and strenuous nature of the hike. Now that you know the history, let's discuss the hike itself. There's many different trailheads you can start at. It's decided by a random lottery on recreation.gov that costs $10 to enter. You won't always win the lottery on the first try, so you'll have to enter a couple times. The different trailheads can range from 13 to 34 miles to complete the summit and end in the Yosemite Valley. My dad and I started at the Cathedral Lakes trailhead, and our hike ended up being about 25 miles. Throughout a couple of long, hot days, hikers will gain 5,000 feet of elevation and travel through many different areas in the valley and see different views that they would have never imagined even existed without doing this trip. Of course, the most daunting part of the hike is the summit. It's extremely notorious for its dangerous nature. The last 400 feet of the hike can take up to an hour because of the heavy foot traffic. There are poles installed every 10 feet, and they have 2x4 planks attached in the middle for hikers to rest and get a little better grip. Oftentimes, to avoid heavy foot traffic, hikers will use a harness and clip onto the cable so that they can climb on the outside of the cable where it's a little bit less slippery from the amount of people who have gone up and down over the many years that this hike has been completed for. Also, many people will decide to complete the hike at sunrise so that they can avoid many different people, so that they'll avoid all the people who are trying to summit that day, since it can get so busy. These people will camp at the base of the trailhead and complete the 2 miles it takes to reach the summit around 5 a.m. Then they'll get to watch the sunrise over the entire Yosemite Valley, which is super cool. Unfortunately, with the beauty of this hike, there is a lot of danger. Last summer, slightly after my dad and I completed this hike, Grace Rolfe and her father tried and attempted it. Unfortunately, when they reached the summit and were completing the cables, a rainstorm rolled in because of the often changing weather in the valley. Sadly, Grace Rolfe ended up slipping and plummeting to her death, falling right past her dad's stretched out arm. Much like my father and I, they just wanted to go on an innocent hike, and it ended up detrimental for them. This is also the outcome for many different hikers. If they aren't wearing good shoes, they can often slip, or weather changes in the valley. Oftentimes, hikers really need to consider the changing weather and make sure that it's safe, because it is really possible to slip underneath the cables and fall to your death, or even get stranded at the summit. Finally, in able to have the safest trip possible, heavy preparation is needed. Hikers will need to complete a lot of physical training. They're going to need to do many preparation hikes so that they're able to carry their heavy backpack for miles on end and multiple days. They're also going to want to do a lot of cardio training so that they can breathe efficiently in the thin mountain air. Another important thing is mental preparation. Hikers are going to need to be prepared for whatever happens to them, and they won't be seeing other people for a long time, nor have service. So they're going to have to be ready for whatever hits them, because unpredictable things can happen when you're out in nature alone. Personally, my dad and I, on our first day of our hike when we went to have lunch by Cathedral Lake, our stove caught on fire because the propane tank got jammed. My dad ended up kicking it into the lake, and we no longer could use that stove anymore for the rest of our trip. Personally, I started to freak out a little, but luckily, since my dad was there and he had prepared, we had a backup stove, so there was no need to worry. I also got altitude sickness on the first day, and I had to make sure that I had my water filter so that I could stay hydrated and take care of myself as I was throwing up, because it could have been very dangerous. Another important thing is definitely gear. Some necessary gear is a water purifier, since you won't be able to carry enough water for the hike, waterproof boots with good traction so that you're able to get a good grip on that slippery granite, and so that as you're crossing through the different wet areas of the hike and crossing streams, you can keep your feet dry. Personally, on the first day of my hike, I fell into a river crossing, and I had to have squishy, wet boots for the rest of the days because they never dried, since it was pretty cool that night. You're also going to need to have a bear box to hold your entire food supply and any scented products, since that's a mandated thing about camping overnight in the Yosemite Valley. You're also going to need bug spray. Bugs were a major issue on my hike. You'll be camping near rivers and water so that you have a water source, but those areas also attract bugs. So especially in the early season, hikers are often swarmed. You're also going to need a tent, a stove to cook, and reliable maps that you've studied and understand, because often the trails are not well marked and you're going to need to remember where you're supposed to go and where you need to camp. In closing, hiking Half Dome is about more than just reaching the top. It's a reminder that sometimes the hardest paths can lead to the best views. This hike was super memorable to me, and I recommend that if you get the chance, or anyone you know gets the chance, you should definitely go for it. Thank you for listening, and I hope that you feel inspired to go outside and see more of the world.